Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Sensory Kids by Nature Summit. We're so happy you're here. Today we are going to be talking about self-directed education and how and why many children really thrive in outdoor settings and with the freedom that comes with following their curiosities, their creativity, their interests. And so my friend and trailblazer in education, Katy Purviance, is here to share more on self-directed education and how, as a teacher, she got out of the conventional school system and founded a whole new learning center here in Spokane, Washington, where we both live. So exciting. So please allow me to introduce Katy Purviance, MAT. Katy believes education should prepare kids for life, not just tests. While studying at Harvard, she stumbled upon John Taylor Gatto and uncovered the unsettling roots of traditional schooling, a system that often stifles curiosity and creativity. From classrooms around the world to her own backyard, Katy saw the same issue everywhere. Determined to make a change, she founded the Spokane Learning Co-op, Washington State's only outdoor self-directed education center. Inspired by Summerhill and Sudbury, the co-op leaves behind grades, homework, and tests. Here, kids collaborate, negotiate, resolving conflicts. They collaborate, negotiate, and take on real-world challenges. They learn by doing, whether that means exploring the outdoors, resolving conflicts, or pursuing big goals. At the co-op, kids don't just learn, they grow into capable, confident adults. For parents, it's not just about education, it's a pathway to help their children thrive. So Katy, a big warm welcome to the summit. I'm so looking forward to exploring this topic with you and have you share your incredible journey and advice that I know you have for teachers and parents who are ready to do something a little different.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to talk about self-directed education. Thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, I can talk about my journey. It's kind of a long journey. I've been wanting to start my own school for longer than I'd wanted to be a teacher. Um, as we mentioned in my bio, I was at Harvard. I was an architecture student. I'd never had an interest in getting into education at all, but there were so many things about my experience there that just didn't line up with what I felt I needed in order to become the architect I wanted to become. And so I started asking those big questions, like, why is school like this? Why do I get no choices in what I'm studying or how I spend my time or who my teachers are, what my projects are? How come none of it is about my vision for myself? And so I started asking those big questions, and I don't know what I Googled, but I found John Taylor Gatto. At the time, he was a New York City and New York State Teacher of the Year, who taught for about 30 years in the system. And he got to a certain point where just by doing everything that he was supposed to do as a teacher, like he wasn't doing anything revolutionary, just doing his job, right? And he realized that just doing his job as a teacher was hurting kids. And so he started asking the big question, why is school like this? Why is it sit down and shut up instead of a more Socratic experience, for example? So that sent him down a rabbit hole where he started looking at the documents and the historical record about this system that we have. And so that's what I stumbled upon. And at the time, it was blog posts on his blog. It became his magnum opus, The Underground History of American Education. I read an entry, a chapter every morning before I went off to Harvard. I posted it on Facebook, and pretty soon all of my teacher friends unfriended me, which that was very interesting. I'm like, don't you want to know the origins of your vocation here? Um, and so that really got me thinking about school. The origins in a nutshell of school is in Prussia, now Germany, the Prussian army, the soldiers, they'd be running into battle. They would realize, oh, I'm going to die because somebody's shooting at me, and they would turn around and run away and save their own lives. Reasonable human behavior to save your life. And the army generals, they were like, oh, how can we get them to run into enemy fire and do what we want them to do? And so they developed a system of schooling where they start them very young. And it's all about obedience training. And it's all about being more afraid of disobeying the authority that's assigned over you than it is in saving your own life. That is the origin of our schooling system. It's not
Thanks.
about education. It's not about self-development. It's not about figuring out who you are and how to develop the most you can be or your best life or anything. It's about obedience. So that's disgusting. I ended up leaving Harvard. That year I read 40 to 50 books on alternative education, and I've been hooked ever since. Um, I did end up becoming a teacher. I became an ESL teacher, English as a second language. I taught abroad. I taught in Poland, Oman in the Middle East, in China, in Albania, right here in Washington State. And it's the same everywhere. Like if you go to school, school means sit down, shut up, do as you're told. I don't like that. I'm not okay with how schools treat kids. I see children as my greatest teachers. I see children as geniuses. We could learn so much if we, the adults, would just be quiet for 2 seconds and see what the kids have to say. I've often told people I wish there was a school adults could go to where children were the teachers. We'd have a very different experience. So that's what got me started. My primary motivation here is I'm not okay with how schools treat kids, and I want to do better.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parents and teachers that can resonate with your feelings and realizations. And for many teachers, I can't imagine that what they're experiencing now relates with why and how they got into teaching to begin with, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Teachers go into this for a number of different reasons. And I don't want to pass judgment. Some are maybe more aligned with the hopes and dreams of fostering a good rising generation than others. But I think most teachers have a good heart, and most of them go into it for the right reasons. They love kids. They want to help kids be their best. They want to, I don't know, there's a certain joy in working with kids too, that
Yeah.
if you work in a bank or a supermarket, maybe you just don't get, right? And so there's a certain draw to this profession and to any profession working with children. But yeah, there's a big, big difference between working with the joy of children and their creativity and their curiosity and not getting fired from your school. There's a lot of requirements and restrictions put on teachers. There's a lot of things teachers are required to do that go against their beliefs on the best way to work with kids. And with beliefs, I'm not talking about political or religious, not at all. I'm talking about what you learned in school, what you learned from life about how to have a good life and how to grow up in a healthy way. Like you look at best practices, different research studies on, what kids need to thrive. And then you look at what you have to do to keep your job. These are different things.
Yes.
I recently learned the term moral injury. That feeling you get when your job requires you to do something that you feel in your heart is absolutely wrong. But also, keep putting food on your table.
Right. Oh, yes. Let's talk about self-directed education. So what is it?
The self-directed education. So if we look at what school is, that is other directed education, right? Somebody else wrote that textbook, somebody else wrote that curriculum, somebody else did your scope and sequence and your pacing and how much you need to get done by a certain date and what the test will be. A lot of that is decided by somebody else who we don't know who they are. It's not the teacher in many cases. In most cases, it's a corporation that is contracted with the state to supply these materials. We don't really know who these people are who are supplying these materials that teachers are forced to use to instruct children. So that's other-led education. So self-directed education is when the child themselves, or you yourself, or I myself, want to do something and we figure out how to do it. And then we learn a bunch of stuff in the process. So a fun example is when I first got started, so Washington has 2 other self-directed education centers. I'm the only outdoor one. So the other 2 are on the west side. And the very first thing I did is I called them up. I'm like, how do you do it? How do you do self-directed education and, check all the boxes with the state? And I was hoping they'd just be like, here you go, here's how you do it. And, they did explain how to do it. But one of them said something really interesting that was both very frustrating and such a gift. She said, it's kind of like a self-directed education project. You figure it out. And I'm like, just tell me. But But I'm glad she didn't tell me because, what worked when she started her school a few decades ago on the West Side, that's a different context than me starting it now on the East Side. Like a lot of things are just different, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I figured it out. I didn't know anything. I didn't know much about, business entities or tax law or UBIs or all the little
Yeah.
things you have to learn when you're setting up any kind of business structure. I didn't know anything about daycare law or homeschool law. I didn't know anything about different programs through OSPI. Just a lot of stuff I didn't know. And if I had been made to, like, let's say I enrolled in a program where I don't know, it's called school for lack of a better term, and we're going to cover all these things, I would have been bored to tears.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have learned anything. I would have been frustrated with my teachers. I would have been frustrated at the fake assignments and the fake projects that we were to do. I would have been frustrated with the standardized test at the end. And I know how to do school. I myself had been in school long enough. I still would have gotten an A and not have learned anything, right? But because I am self-directed, because I'm going after my own goal, and then my own goal is so important to me that I'm willing to push through all the difficulty. Incidentally, I learn all of these things, right? So school has it backwards. School is like, here's a collection of somebody else's answers to somebody else's questions.
Mhm.
And we're like,
Right.
what's your goal? Like in self-directed education, learning isn't the goal. The goal is the goal, and the learning is incidental to going after your goal.
Right.
I
Right.
know
Right.
I know enough about all these things I learned incidentally that I could teach somebody else. I could guide somebody else. But if I had just been made to learn the answers to these questions, I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine with each turn of the rabbit hole you were going down, you became more and more invested in your outcome, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
so what do the kids get in the self-directed education context that they don't get in conventional school systems?
Oh, so much. So since we're an outdoor school, they get fresh air and sunshine and nature. Kids are pretty nature deprived in school.
Hmm.
I read somewhere, I think this was through the 1,000 Hours Outside podcast, something like kids need a minimum of 3 hours of outdoor play. And kids in public school get what, maybe 15 minutes of recess?
Yeah, maybe.
Not enough. Um, kids get oh my gosh, so much. So when you're in the public school system, when you're in a school system where you're following somebody else's rules and you're following somebody else's schedule and somebody else's curriculum, a lot of it is just coping,
Hmm.
right? A lot of it is trying to manage yourself so that you don't get in trouble, so you don't get your name on the board, so you don't get recess taken away, which only in September became illegal in Washington. Um,
Wow.
uh, Kids have to hold on so much so that they're not shamed in front of their peers. And then when they get home, they have something called restraint collapses, which looks like a tantrum, right? Because they've been holding it together all day under oppressive conditions and they're finally in their safe place and they can let go. So in a
Hmm.
self-directed education where there is no coercion, where there's no oppression, when there's nobody trying to control their every move or, being a surveillance state on their person at every move all day long, they can relax. One thing I've heard from parents is that just by having those 3 hours of run around, be crazy time, and they're not running around being crazy, they're actually doing stuff. But by having that time where they get to be themselves and they get to be themselves in nature and they get to explore a lot of different things, they're more peaceful at home. They go to sleep earlier, they sleep through the night easier, less anxiety, just more relaxed, right? They got to spend time in tune with themselves rather than just coping with outside forces. So there's that they get. Another thing they get is they get to explore other things that they might not get a chance to otherwise. So at the Spokane Learning Co-op, we have a variety of it's an environment of materials and tools that they are free to use at any time. Like, please clean up after yourself, but you're free to use anything you want at any time. And it's really cool because we have this box of different fabrics. And some of the kids have decided they're going to sew. And some of these kids are 7 years old, 8 years old, never held a needle and thread in their lives. And they're trying to figure it out, right? Like we'll help with some parts, like threading the needle is difficult, or taught them how to tie knots, but seeing them for the very first time trying to work this little needle, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. One little boy, 7 years old, never sewn in his life, made such excellent stitches. What?
Wow.
It's so cool. What else? What else do they do? They build their own houses. This is the thing they do the most. So we have these large 8 foot long straw bales and all this scrap building material, right? And so they like building their own houses, their own villages. They experiment with different things. The latest thing they started doing with building their own houses was making a mud pit and then applying the mud to seal the cracks between the wood, right?
It's
It's
nice.
beautiful. It's beautiful. And then, so another thing they were doing is they were mixing paint and pouring it onto the snow yesterday to make colored snow and trying mixing different colors together, right? They have an open invitation to try things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's frustrating and sometimes they get a result they weren't expecting, but that's what learning is.
Hmm.
And then another really, really cool thing that they learn that they don't learn in school is how to communicate and negotiate and solve conflict with their peers. So some people say, you have to send your kids to school. How else will they socialize? Oh, did you forget? Socialization is not allowed in school. You get in trouble for that. And so at the co-op, they can talk to anybody, anytime, as much as they want. I had to stay after school almost every single day in second grade because I wouldn't stop talking because I was so excited to get to know everyone around me. We don't have limitations like please talk to each other. Wouldn't we have a nicer world today if we grew up being able to talk to people?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, and another cool thing is school teaches tattling, right?
Hmm.
In a classroom, there's one authority, and that's the teacher. You have no right and no authority to work things out with your peer. You're supposed to go to the teacher who comes in, who swoops in and solves the problems, right?
Right.
And so we don't learn how to work things out with each other. We learn to appeal to another authority figure to solve our problems for us. So what we really
Mhm.
try to do is to empower the kids to solve their own problems. What that looks like is they make the rules. So in the very beginning, I had a piece of paper and we had a stone and we passed it around. When you have the stone, it's your turn to talk. When you don't have the stone, it's your turn to listen. And I asked each person, how do you want to be treated here? I wrote those down. Those are our rules. And it was really interesting seeing how some of those rules clash, like um, share and you can't take somebody else's materials until they're done and be respectful and be kind. In the real world, sometimes these clash. And so it's really interesting to see how the kids navigate that, right?
Yeah.
And for us adults, we're used to swooping in and
Hmm.
solving their problems for them. And so it's some unlearning for us to step back. We've empowered them. They know what the rules are. They're literally holding the clipboard, reading each other the rules, trying to work it out, little kids. And it's up to us to like stand back, let them figure it out. And it's cool to watch them figure it out. And it's also cool to see that they notice that their own rules clash. And so
Uh-huh.
sometimes we rules. For example, one of the rules was don't throw dirt at people. Okay, but what if you're playing a game that involves throwing dirt at people? Are you not allowed
Hmm.
to play it? And so that rule changed to tell people what the game is before you start playing it with them and see if they want to play. That's a much better rule than don't throw dirt at people.
So
But
wise.
we wouldn't have encountered that unless that situation was allowed to emerge. Our rules are emergent rather than prescriptive. What comes up in real life that we don't like, let's talk about it and make a rule about it rather than just imagining what might happen. We don't know what might
Mm.
happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like it makes for a very fluid uh, day-to-day environment for them and one that respects them. Can you tell everyone more about your school specifically, like in terms of the age range, the families that come to you? Are they homeschooling? Are they public? What's your schedule for the school look like?
So right now we're a homeschool co-op. It's our intention to become a full-time program. And I'm actively working on every single day on moving us forward in that direction. But right now it's a homeschool co-op. So Washington's kind of tricky. I had a call with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and they were like, yeah, if you were in New Jersey, all you need is a business license and you could open your full-time program tomorrow. But in
Mm.
Washington, it's illegal. And so I've learned a lot about state law, about what exactly we can and cannot do. So right now, we have 3 weekly gatherings. It's Tuesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, Friday afternoon. Each one's 3 hours long.
Hmm.
Uh, We cook together with the kids Wednesdays and Fridays. Our youngest student, I don't want to say student, our youngest participant is 1, and
Oh,
our oldest is 16. Um, so any kids, any age is welcome to come to any session, but they tend to gravitate towards, sessions with similar age peers. Let's see. So yeah, we work with homeschoolers. A lot of our families come to us because they were maybe made to feel not so welcome at the other local co-ops. We do things differently than a lot of the other local co-ops. One of the things is that parents are not required to stay and teach a class because we don't have classes. We do have something called offerings. Any parent or any kid is welcome to offer to do something. It's a suggestion, an idea that might be helping with cooking, that might be a particular craft or a particular game or something like that, but it's not mandatory. Nobody has to do it. Nobody has to offer. We don't have a schedule like, oh, it's your turn to offer. No, it's like, oh, you had an idea, you want to give it a whirl, right? So that's
nice.
one thing that sets us apart. Another thing that sets us apart is we don't require parents to stay. We're drop off. If kids are, our original intention was to only work with school age kids,
Hmm.
but there's so much interest with younger kids too that, so parents do have to stay if their child is under the age of 5. So 0 to 4, please stay. For older kids, you can drop off. We're a co-op, which means parents are required to help in some way. And right now what that's looking like is they'll come 25% of the time. So it's a weekly gathering. And so parents, please stay at least once a month. Please sign up for a slot to help with cooking. We have enough people that, like on our Wednesday session, we have enough families there that you'd only have to help with cooking like once every 2 months.
Wow.
Um, and then the third thing that really sets us apart is many of the local co-ops require families to sign a statement of faith. Um, and a lot of our families come to us because they don't feel comfortable with that particular statement of faith. It doesn't work for them or their family. Um, so yeah, we are wanting to be, maybe are the most welcoming and inclusive alternative education option in Spokane. I tell people, if you believe in self-directed education, you're welcome. I believe that diversity makes us stronger. I myself have been to 24 countries in every state, and I think travel is the best teacher, right? Because then you're immersed in
Yes.
somebody else's culture, somebody else's language, somebody else's point of view, and it makes you really think about life and yourself. It's an incredible teacher. And if you can't travel for whatever reason, the next best thing you can do is surround yourself by a lot of people who aren't like you, who
Hmm.
are thinking in new ways. So we want to be. You're welcome. Please come.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's one of the reasons why I love um, Katie and her work. So I got to go visit your center a couple months back, and it was one of the. It's out in the field. It's got woods around, and she had this little um, like a shed structure where kids can get in and out of the elements, and then like a carport scenario. So there's more covered outdoor space. But one of the features she has in this big field is this. How tall is it? It's this pyramid looking structure made out of huge hay bales. And it's
It's
like, well,
all by 20 by 24. It's huge.
it's huge. And the kids had put lumber and tires, and they were rolling tires down and climbing up in different ways. And uh, all ages were around it, and it was just really phenomenal seeing. And they had built this like um, kind of hut made out of bales with lumber and siding and all these things that created some sort of like little fort area. Actually, it wasn't little; it was a big fort area. So I was just struck by the ingenuity that they were all doing together. Really
Well, it's
beautiful.
and you think about like some of these things that they're lifting are quite heavy. Like we have a couple of those large wooden spools, that
Mhm.
electrical wires. We have a couple of those. And once I looked over at the straw bale pyramid and one of those was on top. Those are really heavy. Nothing says teamwork like a heavy object high up.
Yeah, they all had the shared mission.
Yes.
And it's all outdoors. So can you talk about why outdoor free play, not
Yeah.
structured play, but free play is so important in self-directed education, and why and how kids really thrive in outdoor settings?
Yeah, there's a few different things I could say about that. One, it's like getting back to our human roots, right? Most of human history, we were outdoors. Most of human history, we lived in small communities, right? Like the idea of being indoors is kind of new in our species history, right? And so there's something primal, there's something vital about being outdoors, about playing outdoors, about running around outdoors and eating outdoors. Like it does something primal to you. There just seems to be a lot less anxiety than you get inside of a classroom. A lot of classrooms, they don't have natural light. The last school I worked at, my classroom, my office classroom was a very small, dark gray, windowless basement. That meant in the winter, Monday through Friday, I had no daylight. That's so bad for
Gosh.
your health, your mental health, your everything, right?
Everything.
Just having that sunlight, just having sunlight on your skin or daylight on your skin and in your eyes and that fresh air, like that does so much to regulate your nervous system, to calm you down, to help you appreciate what's around you. When you're in an artificial environment all day long, it's like, oh, it's like this attack on you. I recently read a study about indoor spaces, about how there's just not enough oxygen flow, right?
Oh.
There's
Hmm.
not enough oxygen for your brain to operate at max of at peak capacity, normal capacity. Um, and the person who wrote this study or this article, they had like an oxygen meter, and they were showing how maybe you have the windows open and you're getting some fresh air in, and then oh, it's getting a little cold, and you close it, and then the meter shows like do 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 do, you know, you're breathing the oxygen and putting out carbon dioxide, and then your oxygen levels aren't as high. You don't notice maybe, but it's really affecting you. It's affecting your ability to think and your well-being. So just being outdoors in nature is so, so good for us. And then having that as your basic environment, and then within that basic environment, getting to do what you want to do. There's I don't know, there's this beauty to it. There's this joy and this beauty and this freedom to being able to move your body when you need to move your body, and being able to go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom, being able to eat when you want to eat, and being able to pursue your interests and what comes up. Um, I think what we're doing is a lot closer to how humans have lived for millions of years, right? Like what schools, as we know, has been around for like 170 years. That's a little blip.
Yeah.
That's and it's so far removed from how we evolved to be or how we developed to be in a more natural environment.
Yeah, and it's important for all ages from 0 to until the day we die, right? And I was just talking in our first interview with Dr. Robert Melillo about the importance of environments and brain development and how important it is to get your little ones outside. Even when we think they're too little to go spend out time outside, they need to be outside in the natural environments because it's doing incredible things. Their brains are literally doing acrobatics and gymnastics in this development, and it's how our bodies are designed to operate and progress and into these complex brains and human beings that we become. And we can't do that without nature.
You know what? Yes, I that reminds me, I heard it. This is also 1,000 Hours Outdoor podcast about screens, right? And we're an outdoor school. We don't have screens, but we don't have screens, but we're deliberately screen free. This episode I heard, it was talking about like we've always learned in 3 dimensions, right? If you're looking at a screen that's 2 dimensional, when you give a child, especially a young child, too much screen time too early, it's forcing their brain to learn in 2 dimensions. It's meant to learn in 3 dimensions. It's not developing properly if it's developing in 2 dimensions. And I see little kids, that's their babysitter.
Yeah.
Tragic.
Yeah, it is. And not only that, it feeds them in terms of the senses, it's feeding them junk food. And so they're not getting the kinds and different kinds and different intensities of the different stimulation that they're meant to. And so it affects so many things.
Also, everything they're looking at on a screen is curated by somebody else and might
Yeah.
have an agenda that you might not agree with. But that's their version of reality that they're learning because that's what they're looking at,
Yeah.
right? It might be some kind of dopamine hijack, right? And then they get out into the real world or just put the screen down and it doesn't match this reality that they've built from looking at the screen for so long. And then I don't know, you see little kids with a tablet addiction and oh my gosh, can
Yeah.
we not?
Yeah. Have you read the book Glow Kids?
Not yet. That's on
Glow
my list.
Kids. Yeah, I am about three-quarters of the way through it. Woof. Yeah, anyone who wants to get more um, educated on how screen time is really impacting our kids, read Glow Kids, and I'll put the link to Glow Kids in and these studies that Katy has been mentioning. I'll add that to the email that you're receiving about Katy's session today. Um, so speaking of that, Katy, this has been such an incredible conversation. You have a free gift, which is a free download for our listeners. Can you share with us about that?
Yeah, it's really intended for parents who are thinking about or who are currently sending their kids to a conventional school system. And it's 10 clear signals that maybe it's time to pull your kid out. And so it's a list of 10 things that, you might notice in your child that maybe are a little different than they were behaviors that they might be exhibiting now that you might be observing that they didn't exhibit before they started going to school. A lot of parents will notice that maybe their child isn't as compassionate or not as creative, that they cry more easily,
Mm.
they get frustrated, they give up more easily. They might have noticed some of these changes since sending their child to school. And so this is a list of 10 things to look for. And if you're noticing
Awesome.
these signs in your child, that's school.
Yeah,
School did that.
yeah. So the link for Katy's free gift is going to be again in the email that you received for today's speaker. Katy, before we wrap up, can you please share with everyone how they can find you, how they can learn more about you and your work in the Spokane Learning Co-op, and how best to contact you?
Sure, yeah. So our website is www.spokanelearningcoop.org. You do need the www. We're also on Facebook. We just hit 1,200 followers the other day. That's exciting.
Yeah.
The Spokane Learning Co-op on Facebook. We have a Facebook group for people who are either, part of our community or curious about our community or want to support our community, and that's Friends of Spokane Learning Co-op. We're also on Instagram, but I'm not very active there. So either our website, you can sign up for our mailing list and get the freebie, or find us on Facebook. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I'm really easy to find too. Katy Purviance on Facebook. Feel free to send me a message. I will help you out in whatever way I can.
Perfect. I hope more people follow in your footsteps, uh, generally speaking, because I know, as you had heard, that it's sometimes you have to find your own path with things, right?
Right.
So, Katy, thank you so much for being on the summit today, and we will see everyone soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.